All right. Well, in today's video, I want to talk about real risk. So we're going to talk about risk. And I put the term real risk in there because a lot of times we think we're focused on risk, but we're not really focused on the biggest risks in our organization. And often we get sidetracked and what I kind of call we go barking up the wrong tree. And so I'm going to talk about that today. Now, the impetus from this, and so thank you, Yana. I put a link to an article that she just posted on LinkedIn that I read, and she's right, and it actually prompted me to do today's video. So the link is there if you'd like to go see her original post. I'm going to quote a little bit from it and just explain a little bit why the real risks may not be in your internal audit plan. And there's some reasons for that. She talks about that a little bit in the article, which is mainly focused on compliance people, but it also has relevance to people in risk management and internal audit. So here we go. Let's talk about it, and I'll explain a little bit more why. Even though you feel like you may be taking a risk-based approach, you may not be, and you may not even be realizing it. So let's get into the details. So in her article, I'm going to be looking at this way to kind of read off the screen a little bit too as I'm recording. But she talks about the first part about the article is about fiat currency. And so again, if you're familiar with what a fiat currency is, it's a currency backed by a government, and it's usually, US dollars, British pounds, euros, rubles, whatever, that are kind of backed by a government and usually are not based on hard assets. Okay. And so she goes through and first off kind of talks a little bit about why fiat currencies are so risky, but people don't realize it. Okay. And so again, this is important for us to think about is probably nobody in your organization is talking about fiat currency risk because everybody assumes that they're all stable when in fact they're not as stable as you would think. In fact, there are some things coming that the digital reset, you can type that into Google if you want to. But there's some different international monetary changes that are going to be coming that some large institutions are behind that actually are a huge risk for individuals, but also for organizations. Okay, but that's not the purpose of today's video, but I want to talk about real risks and why they may not be included in your audit plan. So I'm just going to share a little bit from her article to make the point, right, that again, sometimes the risks are not where we expect them to be, or some things that we think are absolutely not risks may be some of the highest risks that you actually have in your organization. Okay, and so again, I'm going to talk a little bit about fiat currency from this because you may be sitting there thinking, well, there is no risk in fiat currency. Well, is there after we talk about it for a little bit? So, again, fiat currencies usually inherently lead to inflation and the gradual loss of purchasing power. So we've seen that already with the inflation the last year or two, the less consumer purchasing power that there is, and the fact that some people are actually starting to talk about deflation. Right, where actually Walmart, I think this week or last week, in the earnings report, talked about the potential for deflation and actually them having to lower some of their prices. So anyway, so let's talk about this. Where and again, quoting from our article, fiat money systems promote a culture of consumerism and short-term thinking. Inflationary pressures discourage savings and prudent financial planning, leading to overconsumption and financial instability. When people think short term, it's much harder to appreciate long-term events, which erode the principles of hard work, savings, and responsible stewardship of resources. The ability to print money and borrow fosters a disconnect from tangible value of goods and services. So sound money is crucial for sustainable innovation and the advancement of civilization. Okay. Now, this is where she gets into and talks about the biggest risk. So again, if you're thinking, well, there is no risk to fiat currency, well, here's at least her opinion, and I would suggest that you may consider it because it's much more real than you may realize. Okay. And so she says the biggest risk of fiat-based inflationary system is that it functions as a financial pyramid and creates conditions for financial institutions to concentrate their credit risk and counterparty exposure with a few large clients, which in turn often result in black swan events. Okay. Have we seen that before? Absolutely, we have. In several of the different economic downturns, that has actually happened. And again, for most people in the world, they think, oh, the US dollar is solid. But look around at some of the other currencies in the world. They're not as solid as you think. And maybe the US dollar is not even as stable as you might think. Okay. Now, in her article, and again, this is going to compliance people, but I'm going to show you how it relates to people in internal audit also, is she kind of explains that about the fiat currency and then says, look, right, fiat currency is a big risk for you and your organization, but nobody's talking about it and nobody's doing anything about it. And why? Because you're being distracted. You're being distracted. Okay, and so she gives a couple of examples. SOX, right? A lot of organizations are spending a lot of time and money on SOX. And again, it's a compliance requirement. You got to do it, right? But spending a bunch of time in that area means that you're not spending time on the true risks in your organization, right? FATCA, CRS, Dodd-Frank Act, Basel, 2 and 3, ESG. These are all things, again, that are compliance requirements that people, and organizations are spending, billions of dollars a year to comply with. And what it's doing is it's keeping them in the details and not allowing them to see the true bigger picture and risk that's actually going on in the world and that's affecting their organization. Okay. Now, why do I say that? None of those compliance things are going to cause a business to go out of business if they have a solid business foundation. Okay. No company went out of business because they failed to meet certain SOX controls, because they weren't doing ESG the way the government wanted them to do it necessarily. Now, again, I know there are implications and people will say, oh, no, well, you can't do that because they'll shut you down. They're not going to, right? If you have sound economic foundations in your business, right, the fact that you don't comply with those things has nothing to do with how well you're going to do in your business. Yes, you may have to pay some fines, but again, that's okay. It's not going to break your business, right? But failing to think about some of these true risks or real risks that are actually affecting your organization, those things can cause you to go out of business. So again, there's lots of risks that are out there. I can't go through all of them today, but I will say that currency is one of the big things that is out there that nobody is talking about. Right? Everybody assumes fiat currency is safe. It's not necessarily. And especially if we go through this whole digital reset, it's going to make things even more unstable. It can lead to a lot of consumer issues, many to try to go in today. But also it can effectively handcuff organizations because it turns over the power of the economic system to a few organizations that can tell you what you're allowed to use your money for and what you're not allowed to use your money for. Okay? And again, it's a real thing. Now, some of the other stuff that's out there, right? I mean, again, if you go out and do some Google searches about things that are going on in the world, I know I've talked about this before, of things like active war zones. And again, a lot of people think, well, I'm not in Israel, I'm not in Ukraine, I don't have operations there. So those kind of conflicts don't actually affect my organization. Well, if you actually dig into it deeper, you will find out that almost every organization around the world is affected by active war zone things in one way or another. And it's not just in guns and bombs, bullets and guns and bombs, right? That a lot of the active war zone things that are going on today relate to cybersecurity. They relate to some infrastructure issues and other things like that that can cause any organization to be very vulnerable. Okay. So again, the purpose of this video was not, I'm not going to make this a 2-hour video to try to go through everything. But what I do want to pose to you is, I'm guessing that if you took a look at your audit plan, you will find that you are being distracted and doing much more compliance type work in your audit plan that really does not have anything to do with the key objectives or key risks to your organization. Now, by doing that, again, you may be satisfying certain stakeholders that require you to do those things. But what you're doing is you're actually dumbing down internal audit. You're acting as a compliance function. And so you are viewed as a compliance function. The value that you're adding is no different than a compliance function. And so, again, I know a lot of people in internal audit, they're having their budgets cut, or they can't spend, they can't hire people, business doesn't want to invest in them. And part of the reason is the perception of internal audit, if that's what you're doing, is mainly compliance work, is that you're just a compliance administrative cost center. Okay. Now, if you're doing more risk-based work that really focuses on the key objectives and risks to your organization, you're no longer going to be seen as a cost center, because all of a sudden things are going to start to change and the executives are actually going to see that you're providing real value and helping them with the things they really need help with. Okay. And by doing that, it's going to increase your value in the organization, the respect that you get. Again, a lot of people, I get no respect. I want respect as internal audit. Well, if you want respect as internal audit, maybe you should do and focus your efforts on areas that actually are valuable to the organization. Now, I've talked before on other videos, I think I did one a few days ago called 5 Audits Are Better Than 100, where I talked about this concept again. And, after writing a book and doing a couple of different courses and certifications on risk-based internal audit, I kind of thought I was done talking about it. But I've been surprised as I've been going through the skills gap analysis and other things that, no, one of the biggest gaps is actually critical thinking and risk-based internal auditing that go hand in hand, because so many auditors today have been trained to just audit for compliance. And so they don't think, they just look at a standard checklist or a standard audit work program or the standard requirements from a compliance document. And so what's happened is, over the last 20 years, so many internal audit departments have gotten distracted, just like Yana was talking about in her article. You may be focused on many more compliance things and not actually looking at or thinking and seeing where the risks really are, right? Because again, one of the things internal auditors are famous for saying is that compliance is a risk. It's not. They're I hear all the time, a control failure is a risk. No, it's not, right? That's not actually what risk is. And so we really have to start kind of changing our mindset and really get back to where we were leading about 20 years ago. The problem is that people got sidetracked again. And so again, if you want to stay sidetracked, that's okay. That's okay. But if you really do want to start adding more value to your organization and start focusing on the areas that really matter to your executives, I put some resources in the description here. You can find out more information through the Certified Risk-Based Internal Auditor course. There's more about how to develop a true risk-based audit plan in that, and also in the Certified Chief Audit Executive course. So again, when you're ready, if you'd like more information on that, those are two great resources for you to go to that are available 24/7 because they're all online. Everything is recorded, and you can go through it on your own pace. Now, the other thing too is the Audit Leader Forum. These are the kinds of things that we talk about in the Audit Leader Forum twice a month. And so again, I put a link in there for that. If that's something that interests you, there's the link where you can join and register so you can attend those calls. Or you can always message me as well and let me know if there are questions I can answer for you. Okay. So with that, again, as we kind of started off, take a look at your audit plan. See what things are there. See where, if you really are capturing the true risks in your organization, or if you're only putting on the audit plan those things that are maybe compliance requirements, stakeholder requirements, expectations of your regulators, and you're really getting sidetracked and not seeing the bigger picture. Because again, if this happens over and over again in every financial downturn that we have, a bunch of really smart people say, I never saw it happening. It was a black swan. Well, they're not really black swans because they happen every so often, and there's kind of a standard pattern that they tend to follow, which again, Yana kind of made reference to in her article as well. A lot of times these black swan events happen because things get so out of kilter and people suffer as a result of it. Now, the problem is it's you and me. It's the little guy. It's the little companies. It's the mid-sized companies that are the ones who suffer when these things happen, because a lot of the people that are behind the scenes pulling the strings are doing it for their benefit. And so again, if you look at a lot of the things that have happened, go back to 2007, 2008, when we had the last big financial crisis, and just think about that, right? Who was hurt during that crisis and who benefited from it? And when you can start to think about that, you start to see the world a little bit different as well. So again, can't do everything in a 15, I guess we're up to 18, 19 minutes right now video. But I just wanted to share that with you because, again, as I read that article today, it reminded me that what's true for compliance individuals of being distracted is also true for internal auditors, because I see a lot of internal audit departments that are distracted. They're spending 70, 80, 90% of their time on compliance issues, and they're not really doing internal audit the way internal audit was intended to be. So with that, again, if you disagree with me if you want to, agree with me if you want to, you can include in the comments below. But for now, I'm going to wrap it up, and I will see you on the next live video.